G'day guys and gal, there has been a donkey load of battles within Warhammer 40k. Some are unbelievably epic and are a must know for all fans, others are pretty generic, uninspired and forgettable. The Battle of Pluto, despite being wildly awesome and contrasting skills of the Imperial Fists and Alpha Legion, often flies under the radar, as it was overshadowed by the insanity that was the Siege of Terra. But make no mistake, the Battle of Pluto, as well as its setup and aftermath, was extremely interesting, as it not only gave us a great insight to what the Alpha Legion is actually trying to accomplish, but it also showed off how brilliant Rogal Dorn is as well. So it's my absolute pleasure to dive into it today, because it was actually one of the most complicated engagements in all of 40k. Before we get started, the greatest 40k mobile game ever made just got even greater, as I've partnered up with Tacticus for this video. You may know Tacticus is the game that became the object of my obsession. I was in the top 5 highest ranked guild, had a maxed out god tier lineup, and had beaten every single campaign, including the legendary campaigns. This game really gets ya. Since I last spoke of Tacticus, they've had a lot of updates. The World Eaters are now here, as is Asmodai, as well as the Guild Wars feature. But what I'm really here to talk to you about today is about the Machines of War update, which allows players to bring in a 6th special unit into the battle for the first time ever. However, this unit cannot move and it cannot attack like normal characters. Instead, they almost act as like a support or artillery piece, adding an extra element of strategy to the game. Could be a Biovore or an artillery squad or a big ass chaos monster guy. These Machines of War can be brought into the arena game mode, the tournament arena PvP mode, guild raid, which are the game's boss fights, as well as guild wars. This update, as well as all the new characters and factions, makes it a great time to start Tacticus or get back into it, especially since using my reward code Major Machine, you'll get a cheeky bonus gift, valid for both new and existing players. So use the QR code on screen or click my link below now to get started. Cheers to Tacticus for sponsoring this video. Today we'll go over the Battle of Pluto, checking out the lead up to it, the various moving parts, and the battle itself, to determine if the Alpha Legion was trying to strike a devastating mortal blow against the Loyalists in order to soften them up, or if it was actually the Alpha Legion trying to prove their loyalty to the Imperium in the most Alpha Legion way possible. Let's get into it. Okay, so we do need to set the scene. After all, this was an Alpha Legion battle, so obviously it's going to be convoluted as fuck. The Alpha Legion had placed a number of its agents in stasis on Terra years before the outbreak of the Horus Heresy. The reasoning isn't super duper clear, but they were given various different potential missions based on what their activation codes were. We don't know exactly what each code meant, but some codes were more loyalist leaning and others were more traitor leaning. The fact that Alpharius had put these Marines here with these codes years before Horus would turn traitor and kick off the fiasco is pretty alarming, with the Marines themselves being quite disturbed to wake up in a galaxy that was very different to the one they went in stasis for. But regardless, these Marines were to perform a number of sabotage-based missions against Terra, designed to spook it and outline its weaknesses, however not cause any sort of serious damage. The Alpha Legion's first move in this complicated scheme was to instigate various different low impact but loud sabotages. They made a spaceship blow up with the power of a turbo nuke, lighting up the skies of Terra. They filled a space station with psycho gas that made its occupants murder each other. They instigated riots and played the War Master's name on repeat on loudspeakers across the world. All of this distracted the Imperium long enough for an Alpha Legion strike team to infiltrate the palace, led by a space marine called Silonius. Their target was a big room that held a statue of each of the Primarchs, both loyal and traitor. They detonated bombs on each of the statues to create a controlled demolition. However, due to the brilliance of Rogal Dorn and his Huskal commander Archamus, they were able to intercept this team and kill all of them bar Silonius. However, the mission was a success. All statues collapsed except for Rogal Dorn and Alpharius's, more or less stating that Alpharius was setting up a showdown with Rogal and he wanted Rogal to know about it. Now, although the Alpha Legion's shock attack was loud and scary, it did basically zero lasting damage to the Sol System's defenses. It was incredibly superficial, like a loud clap or a slap that sounds painful but isn't. You could argue that it was because the goal was to distract, not actually damage, or that the Imperial Fist defenses were too good, so only superficial targets could be hit, but I think there's more to it than that, which I'll get into later. Archamus is sent on a bit of a Sherlock Holmes-esque goose chase with the help of some diverse sidekicks to try track down Silonius and uncover his plot, while Dorn takes a huge chunk of the defenders and phalanx out of the Sol System to seemingly counterattack a traitor fleet which has been silencing the systems next to Sol. Dorn's apparent logic is that the Alpha Legion would never expect him to leave the Sol System, so would be unprepared for a devastating counterattack. However, Alpharius had predicted this, and also predicted Archamus eventually catching up to Silonius, or as it's revealed, Silonius being Alpharius all along, who underwent temporary psychic reconstruction, meaning yes, a traitor Primarch got into the Imperial Palace prior to the Siege of Terra. Alpharius springs the Alpha Legion's trap. 2 armadas converge on Pluto. The first is 100 basic shitty trap ships to tie up Sigismund's defense fleet, while another 200 elite Alpha Legion ships attacked from the flank. 200 ships that had been floating dead in the void for a year in the Sol system in preparation for this. The entire plan and its execution was so extra and over the top, very much a certified Alpharius moment. Sigismund's men board the first 100 ships, however find themselves ambushed by Alpha Legionnaires as the 200 ships flank them. Their star forts and whatnot are boarded and taken over, and shit is looking grim as. To make matters worse, Archamus and his merry men are ambushed on a space station orbiting Pluto, with Archamus getting stabbed in the chest by Alpharius himself. Basically, it's looking like the Imperial Fists have played right into the Alpha Legion's hands, with a smug Alpharius tutting at how predictable the Imperial Fists are. But that's when Dorn launches his own surprise, showing that Alpharius had played into his hands instead. Dorn and his mega fleet never really left the Sol system. They travelled to its edges, pretended to warp jump, but in reality just used the system's gravitational pull to do a lap of the system and then slingshot themselves to Pluto at the right moment. And that moment came. Dorn's epic fuck you fleet, led by his Gloriana class ship and the Phalanx, they tear into the Alpha Legion fleet, obliterating ships like George Pell obliterates choir boys. Alpharius only has a moment to say, well, shit, before Dorn and his Huskar elites teleport onto the space station he is on. Alpharius charges with his Lunarian elite Terminators who crash into Dorn and his chosen sons. Alpharius is described as fighting like a tide, rushing in for feral close quarter butchery before dashing out of range and then preparing to re-engage and strike like a viper. In and out, in and out. Dorn on the other hand is an unstoppable force, tearing through the Lunarians with his giga fuck chainsword. Somehow, Archamus has also returned to his feet through sheer force of will, despite having one of his hearts destroyed. Dorn and Alpharius finally engage in battle and begin a vicious duel. Alpharius is all poise and speed, Dorn an impenetrable fortress. They trade blow after blow. Any Space Marine attempting to interfere is simply obliterated on the spot as an afterthought. It's at this time that Alpharius starts speaking, which would go on to confuse the shit out of almost everyone. Alpharius says that he isn't here to kill Dorn or break terror, but to deliver them victory. He says he isn't here on behalf of Horus and that he knows Horus's weaknesses. He literally says, I am here to deliver you victory. Over and over he speaks of victory, the truth, true victory. Dorn just ignores it, totally focused on the duel. Archamus watches and sees that Alpharius has baited Dorn with a feint, getting inside Dorn's guard and setting up what appears to be a killing stroke, a perfect thrust that would pierce Dorn's torso. But here's the thing, this moment was basically a miniaturized version of the entire engagement. As Alpharius thrusts, Archamus charges in, even managing to kill a Lunarian Terminator to get there. Archamus attempts to block the blow, but it sends him flying without even slowing it. But that doesn't matter as Dorn shoulder charges into the strike, lodging the spear harmlessly in his shoulder pad. Dorn then grabs Alpharius. All Alpharius can say is, brother, before the butchery begins. Dorn slices off Alpharius' arms at the elbow, then he crisscross slashes his chest, exposing Alpharius' ribs and organs. Dorn then shoves Alpharius' own spear into his chest before finally ripping his sword down on Alpharius' skull, killing his brother and ending the Battle of Pluto. Alpharius dies in a flash of bright white, the indication of any true Primarch death. Archamus witnesses this and finally dies, content that his duty is fulfilled and that his Primarch is safe. The real Silonius, who turns out to be the Harrow Master of the Alpha Legion, orders a full withdrawal, with them getting chased and bombed by the Imperial Fists the entire time. It doesn't specifically state the Alpha Legion's fleet losses, but the 100 initial distraction ships all would have been lost, alongside the thousands of Alpha Legionnaires aboard them. And I wouldn't be surprised if over half of the 200 true Alpha Legionnaire ships were wiped out. They were already suffering losses before Dorn arrived, and when he did, the Phalanx was literally popping 3 or 4 Alpha Legion ships at a time. Then when you consider that most deaths happen when an army routs, it isn't that far-fetched of a number. So what does it all mean? Was Alpharius trying to defect to the Loyalists, teach them a lesson, or was that just a lie, and did he in fact wish to soften up terrorist defenses to make it easier for the War Master? Well, let's look at both sides. Firstly, all the damage and sabotage that the Alpha Legion did was extremely superficial. Not many Imperial Fists died, no important defense systems were compromised, and even when the Imperial Palace itself was breached, all they did was knock over some statues. They easily could have detonated some nuclear warheads in shit and spicy places, but they chose not to. Even choosing Pluto as the battleground keeps the conflict away from Terra, Mars, Jupiter, and other key worlds in the Sol system. Alpharius kept saying that Dorn didn't stand a chance if he defended Terra in the classic Imperial Fist style, implying that he should change his style if he wished to do so. But Alpharius was arrogant and didn't realize that the Imperial Fist style wasn't just this straightforward defense that could be easily unraveled through wit. After all, Dorn outplayed Alpharius, which is why he died and his fleet was crushed. What can be confusing is that Alpharius was generally considered to be the more traitorous of the twins, with Amigon being the more loyalist. So why is Alpharius the one coming to Terra to try help Dorn? In his own retarded way, of course. Some people think it was actually Omegon taking Alpharius' name, with others thinking that Alpharius had a change of heart and believed that yes, maybe the loyalists could actually win. Regardless, there is actually a few interesting points from the engagement that people often overlook. One point was that the Alpha Legion had been collecting a lot of data about Terra's defenses. However, instead of beaming that data out into the void where Horus could collect it, they beamed it back into the Sol system, more than likely as a way of telling Dorn what intel they had gathered, what weaknesses they had discovered, and what Dorn should change. Omegon, now posing as Alpharius after his brother's death, gave Horus a list of the Sol system's defenses, which might seem traitorous, but if they gave Dorn the same list, then Dorn would have fixed all those issues prior to the siege, meaning Horus was using out-of-date data, which I believe since the loyalists made the traitors pay badly for every meter of ground they gained. It's even stated that after the Battle of Pluto, a massive overhaul and purge of Terra's defense network was undertaken to better prepare it. You may have also noticed that the Alpha Legion did not take part in the siege of Terra, with Omegon deliberately taking them elsewhere, likely as an act of loyalty to the Emperor, although there was a few Alpha Legion operatives on Terra, with some acting as loyalists and others acting as traitors. Here's what I think. I think it was Alpharius, not Omegon, who came to Terra. He wanted to flex on Dorn and prove that his method of war was superior. Then upon humiliating Dorn, he would unveil that he was here to help and that he had changed his mind about the war. However, Dorn was too good to be outplayed and he got the upper hand instead, with Alpharius being so flustered that his communication skills became dog shit and he was just too proud to surrender. I've made a few videos on the Alpha Legion already that go into their status as loyalists or traitor legions, and the Battle of Pluto is a great point that dives into that debate. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then pick up some of the new major minis, such as the Golden Dreamer, the Grey Slayer, or the Collector of Infinity. Hit the subscribe button and hit the real subscribe button for more confusing content. Join the Discord for more memes and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.